The quiet girl from the dangerous world the morning sun of Proxima Centauri cast long shadows across the gleaming corridors of the Galactic Training Institute. This prestigious academy, floating in the void between stars, housed the brightest minds from across the galaxy. Students from hundreds of worlds came here to learn the arts of diplomacy, science, and combat. The Institute prided itself on accepting any species, regardless of their origin or apparent limitations. Sarah Chun walked quietly through these corridors, her simple brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail. At 18 years old, she stood 5 feet 4 inches tall, unremarkable by most standards. Her dark eyes took in everything around her while revealing nothing of her thoughts. She wore the standard training uniform like everyone else, but somehow seemed smaller, more fragile than the other students who towered over her. She had been at the Institute for 2 months now, the first human exchange student ever accepted into their advanced programs. The paperwork had taken years to process. Earth was still considered a backwater world by galactic standards, barely achieving faster-than-light travel. Just 50 years ago, most species viewed humans as newcomers, primitive beings who had much to learn about the wider universe. Sarah didn't mind the assumptions. She had grown up learning that actions spoke louder than words, and she preferred to let her work demonstrate her worth. Her grades were excellent, her behavior exemplary, and her attendance perfect. She never caused trouble, never complained about the different gravity or atmospheric conditions, and always completed her assignments with quiet efficiency. The combat training facility was her next destination. The massive dome could simulate any environment in the galaxy, from the frozen wastelands of Hoth 7 to the crushing depths of the Aquarian homeworld. The floors were made of military-grade composite materials designed to withstand the most powerful attacks. Energy dampeners lined the walls to prevent accidental deaths during sparring sessions. Commander Zethkar stood in the center of the training dome, his imposing figure impossible to ignore. The Draknari warrior stood nearly 9 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in natural armor plates that gleamed like polished obsidian. For powerful arms extended from his torso, each ending in clawed hands that could crush steel. His species had evolved on a world of constant warfare, and every aspect of their biology reflected this heritage. Zethkar had been teaching combat at the Institute for over 30 years. In that time, he had trained warriors from dozens of species, but none had ever truly challenged him. The Draknari were considered the apex predators of the galaxy, their reflexes 3 times faster than most species, their strength unmatched by any known civilization. Zethkar wore this reputation like armor, and his ego had grown accordingly. The other students were already assembled when Sarah arrived. 23 beings from across the galaxy sat in the observation area, their various forms creating a bizarre but beautiful tapestry of galactic diversity. The Vedhans, with their crystalline bodies that caught and reflected light in prismatic patterns, chimed softly as they communicated. The Nalari students, gaseous beings contained within environmental suits, flickered with bioluminescent patterns that indicated their emotions. The insectoid Chithari clicked their mandibles in what passed for conversation among their kind. All eyes turned to Sarah as she entered, not out of malice, but out of curiosity. Humans were still a novelty here, and many of the students had never seen one before. She offered a polite smile and took her usual seat in the back, pulling out her datapad to review the day's lesson plan. Students, Zethkar's voice boomed across the dome, echoing off the reinforced walls. Today we continue our study of combat effectiveness across different species. We will examine how evolution shapes fighting ability and why some species naturally excel while others remain limited by their biology. He began pacing across the training floor, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically as he spoke. The Draknari evolved on Karath Prime, a world where only the strongest survived. Our ancestors fought savage beasts, endured crushing gravity, and developed the reflexes necessary to dominate any battlefield. This is why we now lead the Galactic Defense Force and why other species look to us for protection. Sarah continued taking notes, her expression neutral. She had heard similar lectures before, And while she found the xenobiology fascinating, she was always uncomfortable when instructors used their lessons to promote their own species' superiority. Her Earth upbringing had taught her that everyone had something valuable to offer, regardless of their background. Now, Zethkar continued, let us examine the opposite end of the spectrum. Humans, for example, represent an interesting case study in evolutionary limitation. His gaze fixed on Sarah, and she felt the attention of the entire class shift to her. They evolved on a world so isolated that they never faced real evolutionary pressure. Their bodies are soft, their reflexes slow, and their physical strength laughably inadequate. The other students shifted uncomfortably. Even by galactic standards, singling out a student for such criticism was considered poor form. Sarah kept her expression carefully neutral, though she felt heat rising in her cheeks. Humans have only 2 arms, Zethkar continued, warming to his subject. Their bone structure is dense and inflexible, making them slow and clumsy. Their muscle density is among the lowest in the galaxy, and their pain tolerance is virtually non-existent. They come from a world so peaceful that they developed fear responses to the smallest threats. He gestured toward Sarah with one of his upper arms. Miss Chun here represents a species that has never known true conflict. Earth is a garden world, protected by distance from the real dangers of the galaxy. Humans grew soft in their isolation, never developing the strength or speed necessary for survival. Sarah's datapad stylus snapped in her grip. The sharp crack echoed through the dome, causing several students to look her way. She stared down at the broken pieces, surprised by her own reaction. She had been holding it too tightly without realizing it. As you can see, Zethkar said, noticing the broken stylus, humans are so weak that they cannot even control simple tools without breaking them. Their lack of physical coordination is well documented in the galactic databases. Sarah carefully placed the broken pieces on her desk and pulled out another stylus. Her movements were controlled and precise, but there was something different about her posture now. She sat straighter, her dark eyes more focused than before. Perhaps, Zethkar announced, we should provide a practical demonstration of these evolutionary differences. Miss Chun, would you join me on the training floor? The request sent a wave of concern through the class. The Vethin's crystalline bodies dimmed with what appeared to be second-hand embarrassment. The Nalari students' suits flickered with patterns that indicated distress. Even the typically stoic Chithari clicked their mandibles in what sounded like disapproval. Sarah stood slowly, her movements fluid and controlled. I'd be happy to help with the demonstration, Commander, she said politely, her voice carrying that distinctive human accent that many species found oddly musical. As she walked toward the training floor, Sarah's mind raced. She had expected something like this eventually. Her species was new to the galactic community, and prejudices were natural when dealing with the unknown. She had hoped to avoid this kind of confrontation, but it seemed unavoidable now that Zethkar positioned himself about 4 feet away from Sarah, his massive frame casting a shadow over her smaller form. His 4 arms spread wide in what the Draknari called the dominance display, designed to intimidate opponents before combat even began. Now, class, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been challenged, observe the difference between a properly evolved warrior and a primitive survivor. When I demonstrate a basic Draknari combat technique, Miss Chin will react with the typical human fear response. This will illustrate why humans require our protection in the wider galaxy. Sarah nodded politely, her hands clasped behind her back. To the other students, she looked calm and attentive, like a good student receiving valuable instruction. But something had changed in her posture, a subtle shift that spoke of coiled energy waiting to be released. The technique I will demonstrate, Zethkar continued, is called the control strike. It's designed to establish dominance without causing permanent injury. For a human, this will feel like a significant impact, but it's actually quite gentle by Draknari standards. He raised his upper right arm, preparing to deliver what he considered a light educational tap to Sarah's shoulder. The movement was practiced and precise, the result of decades of training. In his mind, this would be a simple demonstration of species hierarchy, nothing more. "Please react naturally, Miss Chun," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't think about it. Just respond with your instincts." Sarah's expression remained perfectly respectful as she replied, "Understood, Commander." Zethkar's arm began its descent toward Sarah's shoulder, moving with the controlled precision of a master warrior. The force was carefully calculated, enough to demonstrate his point without causing real harm to what he considered a fragile specimen. What happened next would be analyzed, discussed, and debated for years to come. In the security recordings, it lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. In the memories of those who witnessed it, it seemed to happen both in slow motion and faster than thought. The moment Zethkar's hand made contact with Sarah's shoulder, everything changed. Her reaction was not the startled stumble he expected, nor the confused flinch the class anticipated. Instead, Sarah's entire body moved like a mechanism designed for exactly this purpose. Her left hand shot up and caught Zethkar's wrist in a grip that would later be measured at over 400 pounds of pressure per square inch. Her right hand grasped his upper arm near the elbow joint. Then, in one fluid motion that seemed to defy physics, she stepped to her left, pivoted on her heel, and used what the combat analysts would later identify as a perfect hip throw. The result was spectacular and impossible. Zethkar, all 9 feet and 600 pounds of apex predator, suddenly found himself flying through the air in a graceful arc that would have been beautiful if it hadn't been so utterly shocking. The physics department would later spend weeks trying to understand how a 125-pound human had generated enough force to launch a 600-pound Draknari 12 feet across the training dome. The silence that followed was absolute. 23 students sat frozen in their seats, their various forms of mouths hanging open in species-appropriate expressions of disbelief. The Nilari students actually flickered out for a moment, their equivalent of fainting. The Vethin's crystalline bodies went completely dark, as if someone had turned off their internal light source. Zethkar landed with a sound that the audio sensors recorded as similar to a cargo shuttle making an emergency landing. His 4 arms tangled together in ways that Draknari anatomy was definitely not designed to accommodate. His legs, usually so powerful and stable, were splayed out at angles that suggested he had temporarily forgotten how to use them. For a long moment, he just lay there, his mind trying to process what had just happened. His yellow eyes, usually sharp and focused, spun in their sockets like malfunctioning gyroscopes. His natural armor, designed to protect him from the claws and fangs of his homeworld's predators, had done nothing to cushion the impact with the training floor. "Oh, no," Sarah said, her voice filled with genuine distress as she hurried toward the fallen instructor. "Commander, are you hurt?" "I'm so sorry. That was just a reflex. I didn't mean for you to fall so hard." Zethkar made a sound that was part groan, part confusion, and part existential crisis. It roughly translated to, "What in the name of the cosmic void just happened to me?" His upper left arm twitched, his lower right arm twitched, and his pride, however, was completely motionless, having apparently departed the training dome entirely. Sarah knelt beside him, her expression filled with the kind of patient concern that humans showed when helping injured creatures. "Are you dizzy? Should I call the medical team? I really didn't mean to hurt you, sir." A reflex, she called it, a simple, unconscious reaction. The other students continued to stare in stunned silence, their understanding of the universe fundamentally altered by what they had just witnessed. Several of the Chithari had begun secreting stress pheromones, creating a chemical cloud that indicated extreme distress. And there, in the middle of the most advanced combat training facility in the galaxy, lay Commander Zethkar, supposedly one of the most dangerous warriors in known space, staring at the ceiling and questioning every assumption he had ever made about strength, evolution, and the nature of primitive species. The quiet girl from the dangerous world had just turned there, understanding of the galaxy upside down, and she was apologizing for it. When instincts take over the medical team arrived within minutes of the incident, led by Dr. Elon, the Institute's chief medical officer. She was a healer-class Seltharian, standing about 7 feet tall, with 6 delicate arms that ended in the most precise medical instruments in the galaxy. Her species had evolved specifically for medical work, their bodies naturally producing compounds that could heal almost any injury. Dr. Elon had been treating students and faculty at the Institute for 15 years. She had dealt with everything from Nulari gas leaks to Vethan crystal fractures, but she had never seen anything quite like the scene that greeted her in the combat training dome. What in the name of the Galactic Core happened here? She demanded, her medical scanner already humming as she approached the still-prone Zethkar. The device's readings made her secondary eyes widen with surprise. I accidentally threw Commander Zethkar across the room, Sarah replied matter-of-factly, as if this were a perfectly normal occurrence. He was demonstrating a combat technique, and I reacted without thinking. Is he going to be okay? Dr. Elon's scanner began making a series of beeps that, according to the medical database, indicated severe confusion on the part of the operator. She shook her head and focused on her patient. That Zethkar's vital signs were stable, but his pride was apparently in critical condition. His 4 arms were slowly untangling themselves, and his eyes had stopped spinning, though they still held a distinctly glassy quality. More concerning were the stress hormone levels the scanner was detecting. They were off the charts. Commander Zethkar, Dr. Elon said gently, "Can you tell me what happened? From your perspective?" The human. He mumbled, gesturing weakly in Sarah's direction. It was supposed to be a demonstration, a gentle tap. She was supposed to lose her balance, maybe stumble backward. Not launch me across the room like a projectile weapon. Launch you across the room, Dr. Elon repeated slowly, her medical training warring with her disbelief. Commander, you outweigh Miss Chen by nearly 500 pounds. You're also significantly taller and stronger than she is. How is such a thing even possible? Zethkar sat up with some difficulty, his natural armor plates scraping against the training floor. That's exactly what I want to know. She's tiny. She's primitive. She's from a backwater world that barely has space travel. How did she do that? Sarah cleared her throat politely. Actually, sir, I think there might be some misunderstanding about human capabilities. We're stronger than most people realize. Dr. Elon turned her attention to Sarah, her scanner humming with increased intensity. Miss Chen, are you injured in any way? That was quite a physical exertion. No, ma'am. I feel fine. Maybe a little embarrassed, but physically, I'm perfectly okay. The scanner's readings made Dr. Elon's main eyes narrow with scientific curiosity. Miss Chen, your heart rate is elevated, your muscle tension is increased, and you're exhibiting signs of what appears to be enhanced physical capability. These readings are unusual. Oh, that's just adrenaline, Sarah explained casually. It's a hormone humans produce when we perceive a threat or engage in physical activity. It temporarily increases our strength, speed, and reaction time. Temporarily increases your strength, Dr. Elon repeated, her voice taking on the tone of someone making a significant discovery. By how much? Sarah shrugged, a gesture that seemed incongruous given what had just happened. It depends on the situation. In extreme circumstances, maybe double or triple our normal capacity. But I wasn't even really stressed just now. That was mostly normal strength. The medical scanner in Dr. Elon's hands began making alarmed beeping sounds. She looked at the readings, looked at Sarah, looked at the readings again, and then made a sound that roughly translated to "this cannot be correct." Miss Chen, Dr. Elon said carefully, according to my scanner, your baseline strength is already approximately 4 times higher than what our medical databases indicate for your species. And you're telling me that wasn't even enhanced performance? Well, Sarah said, thoughtfully, I did grow up on a farm, and I exercise regularly. Plus, I've been working out in the Institute's gym since I arrived. The gravity here is so much lighter than home that I have to work harder to maintain my fitness level. Lighter gravity? Zethkar croaked from his position on the floor. What does that mean? The gravity on Earth is about 9.8 meters per second squared, Sarah explained. It's always felt normal to me, but apparently it's heavier than most worlds. When I first arrived here, I kept overcompensating for everything because I was used to pushing against more resistance. Dr. Elon's scanner was now making sounds that could only be described as electronic panic. Miss Chen, what you just described is 3 times the galactic standard for gravity. Your species evolved in an environment that would be considered hostile by most galactic civilizations. Really? Sarah looked genuinely surprised. I mean, Earth has some challenging aspects, but I wouldn't call it hostile. We have weather patterns, geological activity, and wildlife, but you learned to adapt. The silence that followed was profound. Dr. Elon's 6 arms went completely still. Zethkar's eyes began spinning again, though more slowly this time. Several students in the background made sounds that indicated either awe or terror. Miss Chen, Dr. Elon said slowly, "Would you mind if I ran some comparative tests? I'm beginning to suspect that our understanding of human physiology might be incomplete." "Sure, if it'll help. What do you need me to do?" What followed was 30 minutes of the most fascinating medical examination in the Institute's history. Dr. Elon's first discovery was that Sarah's bone density was approximately 2.8 times higher than the galactic average. Her second discovery was that Sarah's muscle fibers were not only denser than expected, but they were also structured in a way that allowed for what she called explosive kinetic output. Your muscles are designed like biological springs, Dr. Elon explained to the fascinated and terrified audience. They can store and release energy in ways that most species' bodies simply cannot achieve. It's as if your entire physiology is optimized for survival in extreme conditions. That makes sense, Sarah said helpfully. My ancestors had to deal with predators, natural disasters, and environmental hazards. The ones who survived were the ones who could react quickly when danger appeared. The third discovery made Dr. Elon sit down heavily in a chair. Miss Chin, your nervous system processes information and responds to stimuli approximately 5 times faster than the galactic average. When Commander Zethkar moved toward you, your body had already analyzed the threat and formulated a response before he even made contact. That's just normal human reflexes, Sarah said, looking confused by all the attention. We call it the fight or flight response. When something threatens us, our bodies automatically prepare to either face the danger or run away. It's not really conscious. Fight or flight response, Dr. Elon repeated, her medical training struggling to process the implications. Miss Chin, what you're describing is a biological weapon system. Your species has evolved to become living weapons, designed by evolution to survive in conditions that would kill most of us. That seems like a harsh way to put it, Sarah said, looking genuinely hurt by the description. We're just people trying to get by. We're not weapons. I don't mean it as an insult, Dr. Elon said, quickly. I mean it as a medical observation. Your species has evolved to survive on what we would classify as a Class 7 death world. The fact that you consider it normal is remarkable. Death world. Sarah protested. Earth isn't that bad. Sure, we have earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, ice ages, solar radiation, predators, diseases, and occasional asteroid impact, but most of the time it's actually quite pleasant. The list of Earth's environmental hazards caused several students to make distressed noises in their respective languages. The Vethin's crystalline bodies began resonating at frequencies that indicated deep fear. The Nilari students' suits flickered with patterns that suggested they were reconsidering their entire understanding of the universe. Miss Chun, Dr. Elon said, gently, what you just described is what we would classify as a Class 7 death world. Most galactic civilizations would consider it uninhabitable. The fact that your species not only survived but thrived in such conditions explains everything we've observed today. I guess I never thought about it that way, Sarah said, looking around at the other students with new understanding. I suppose what's normal for us might seem extreme to others. Zethkar, who had been listening to this entire exchange with growing horror, finally managed to stand up. His legs were still somewhat unsteady, but his pride was slowly reassembling itself. "So when I touched your shoulder," he said slowly, "I triggered a defensive response that was evolved over millions of years to deal with predators and natural disasters that would kill most of us instantly. And according to her stress readings, Dr. Elon added, she was actively trying not to hurt you. Her body was holding back." "Holding back?" Zethkar's voice cracked slightly. "I really didn't want to hurt you, Commander," Sarah said earnestly. "I was trying to be as gentle as possible. I just needed to create some distance when I felt threatened." The word gentle hung in the air like a small explosion. Zethkar stared at Sarah, then at the 12-foot distance he had traveled through the air, then back at Sarah. His worldview was undergoing what could only be described as a complete restructuring. "You consider throwing me across the room to be gentle?" he asked weakly. "Well, I didn't use my full strength," Sarah explained, as if this were a reasonable response. "And I made sure you landed on the padded section of the floor. If I had really wanted to hurt you, I would have aimed for the wall or used a different technique entirely." The casual way she mentioned having other, presumably more dangerous techniques available sent a collective shiver through the assembled students. Even the normally fearless Chithari were clicking their mandibles in what sounded like prayers to their ancestral spirits that Dr. Elon was frantically taking notes on her medical datapad. "Miss Chen, I need to ask you some questions about your homeworld. This information will be crucial for updating our databases and ensuring the safety of both human students and the faculty who work with them." "Of course, Doctor. What would you like to know?" And so began the most comprehensive briefing on human capabilities that the Galactic Training Institute had ever received. By the end of it, they would need to revise their entire understanding of what constituted a primitive species. Revelations of a survivor species. The debriefing took place in the Institute's main conference room, a circular chamber with holographic displays that could accommodate beings of all shapes and sizes. Dr. Elon sat at the head of the table, her medical scanner still humming as it analyzed the data from Sarah's examination. Commander Zethkar occupied a reinforced chair designed for Draknari physiology. Though his usual commanding presence seemed somewhat diminished, Director Valax, the Institute's administrator, had joined them upon hearing the initial reports. As a Korthan, he stood nearly 12 feet tall, with a mantis-like appearance that had evolved on one of the galaxy's most diplomatically advanced worlds. His species was known for their ability to mediate disputes between vastly different civilizations, but even his considerable diplomatic experience hadn't prepared him for this situation. "Miss Chun," Director Valax began, his voice carrying the melodic tones that made Korthans such effective negotiators, "we need to understand more about your species and your homeworld. Our databases may be incomplete, and this could affect how we structure our programs for future human students." Sarah sat comfortably in her chair, seemingly unaware of the profound impact her presence was having on everyone around her. "I'm happy to help however I can, Director. What would you like to know?" Dr. Elon consulted her datapad, her 6 arms moving with practiced efficiency. "Let's start with the basics. You mentioned that Earth's gravity is approximately 3 times galactic standard. Can you describe what this means in practical terms?" "Well," Sarah said thoughtfully, "when I first arrived here, I had to learn to walk all over again. Everything felt so light that I kept stumbling because I was pushing too hard against the ground. Simple actions like opening doors or picking up objects became difficult because I was used to applying much more force." "You had to learn to walk again," Director Valax repeated, his mandibles clicking in what passed for amazement among his species. "And yet you adapted within weeks. This suggests remarkable neural plasticity." "I suppose so. Humans are pretty adaptable. We have to be, given our environment." Commander Zethkar leaned forward, his pride having recovered enough to allow for curiosity. "Tell us about this environment. What makes Earth so dangerous?" Sarah's expression grew thoughtful as she considered how to explain her home world to beings who had never experienced anything like it. "Well, the planet itself is constantly changing. The ground moves due to tectonic activity, which can cause earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The atmosphere is dynamic, creating storms that can level entire cities. We have cyclones, tornadoes, blizzards, and floods that can appear with little warning. And your species survived in such conditions? Dr. Elon asked, her medical scanner recording every word. More than survived, Sarah replied. We thrived. When natural disasters struck, we learned to rebuild. When predators threatened us, we developed better defenses. When diseases appeared, we created medicines. Every challenge made us stronger and more resourceful. She paused, remembering her childhood on the farm. My family lived in an area that experienced regular earthquakes. We learned to build structures that could flex and bend without breaking. We kept emergency supplies ready at all times. We practiced evacuation drills until they became second nature. Emergency drills, Director Valex murmured, making notes on his own datapad. Your species practices responding to disasters as a routine part of life. Of course. Where I grew up, we had earthquake drills, fire drills, flood drills, and storm drills. We learned basic first aid, survival skills, and how to work together during emergencies. I thought everyone did that. Commander Zethkar's for arms gestured in what his species considered a sign of respect. Miss Chen, what you're describing is military-level training. Your civilians receive combat and survival instruction as children. I wouldn't call it combat training, Sarah said, looking confused. We just learn how to stay safe and help each other. It's not about fighting, it's about survival and community. Dr. Elon's scanner made a soft chiming sound as it completed its analysis. Miss Chen, I've been comparing your physiological data with our galactic databases. Your species exhibits characteristics that we typically see only in apex predators or elite military forces. Your reflexes, strength, and recovery abilities are extraordinary. But we're not predators, Sarah protested. Most humans are peaceful. We prefer cooperation to conflict. That may be true, Director Valex said gently, but your capacity for conflict is remarkable. When threatened, you become capable of feats that seem impossible to other species. Sarah considered this for a moment. I suppose that's true, but we only use those abilities when we have to. Most of the time, we're just trying to build better lives for ourselves and our families. Tell us about your training, Commander Zethkar said, his voice now carrying genuine curiosity rather than condescension. How did you learn the technique you used on me? Oh, that was just basic self-defense, Sarah replied. My parents enrolled me in martial arts classes when I was 6 years old. They wanted me to be able to protect myself, if necessary. I've been practicing various forms ever since. Various forms? Dr. Elon asked. Well, I started with judo, then learned some karate and boxing. In high school, I took classes in Aikido and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I also learned some military combatives from a neighbor who was a veteran. It seemed like useful knowledge to have. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A human child had been trained in multiple combat disciplines as a matter of course. What they considered basic education, other species would classify as elite military training. Miss Chen, Director Valek said carefully, you mentioned that this was common among your people. How many humans receive such training? I don't know exact numbers, but it's pretty widespread. Most schools offer some form of physical education that includes self-defense. Many communities have martial arts schools, and military training is available for those who want it. We believe in being prepared for whatever challenges life might bring. Commander Zethkar shook his head slowly. A species of warriors who call themselves peaceful. No wonder your people adapted so quickly to space travel. We're not warriors, Sarah said firmly. We're survivors. There's a difference. Warriors seek conflict. We try to avoid it, but we're ready for it if it comes. Dr. Elon made a final note on her datapad. Miss Chen, based on our examination today, I'm recommending several changes to how the Institute handles human students. We need to adjust our equipment standards, modify our training protocols, and ensure that faculty members understand your capabilities. I hope this doesn't cause problems for other humans who want to attend, Sarah said, looking worried. I don't want to make things harder for my species. On the contrary, Director Valek said, this will make things better. Understanding your true capabilities will allow us to provide more appropriate challenges and opportunities. We've been underestimating your potential. Commander Zethkar stood up, his movements more careful than usual. Miss Chen, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your species based on incomplete information. That was unprofessional and unfair. You don't need to apologize, Commander. You were working with the best information you had. Besides, I should have warned you about the strength difference. No, Zethkar said firmly. I should have approached this with more respect and less arrogance. You've taught me a valuable lesson about the dangers of underestimating others. Sarah smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression she'd shown all day. Maybe we could start over? I'd actually like to learn more about Draknari combat techniques. Your species has some fascinating adaptations. For the first time since the incident, Zethkar's expression showed something approaching his old confidence. I would be honored to teach you, Miss Chen, though I suspect our training sessions will be more educational than either of us initially expected. Over the following weeks, word of the incident spread throughout the Institute. The story grew in the telling, as stories often do, but the core facts remained the same. A human student had casually thrown one of the galaxy's most formidable warriors across a room, then apologized for it. The reaction among the student body was fascinating to observe. The initial shock gave way to curiosity, then to a grudging respect that gradually transformed into something approaching reverence. Sarah found herself becoming an unofficial ambassador for her species, fielding questions about human capabilities and Earth's environment. The Vet Han students were particularly interested in human adaptability. Their crystalline forms evolved in stable, predictable environments, and the concept of constant change fascinated them. They began attending Sarah's study groups, eager to learn how humans developed such flexibility in their thinking. The Nalari students, being energy-based life forms, were amazed by human physical resilience. They had evolved in the vacuum of space, where physical trauma was rare, and they found human stories of recovery from injury almost impossible to believe. Sarah showed them scars from childhood accidents that would have been fatal to most species, explaining how human bodies could heal from damage that would destroy other forms of life. The Chithari students, with their hive mind mentality, were intrigued by human individualism. They couldn't understand how a species could be so effective without central coordination until Sarah explained the concept of individual initiative and creative problem-solving. She demonstrated this by organizing study groups where each student contributed their unique strengths to solve complex problems. Commander Zethkar, meanwhile, had undergone his own transformation. The incident had shattered his preconceptions about strength and superiority, forcing him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about combat and leadership. He began studying human military history, fascinated by their ability to overcome seemingly impossible odds through determination and ingenuity. His teaching style evolved as well. Where once he had lectured from a position of assumed superiority, he now encouraged dialogue and mutual learning. His classes became discussions rather than demonstrations, with students from different species sharing their unique perspectives on conflict resolution and survival. The changes weren't limited to the combat training program. The entire institute began adapting to accommodate their new understanding of human capabilities. The engineering department started studying human tool usage, amazed by their ability to improvise solutions from whatever materials were available. The psychology department began investigating human emotional resilience, trying to understand how they maintained hope in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. The Dr. Elon published her findings in the Galactic Medical Journal, sparking debate throughout the scientific community. Her paper, titled Physiological Adaptations in High-Gravity Survival Species, a case study of human capabilities, became one of the most downloaded research articles in galactic history. The Institute's administration implemented new protocols for human students. Training equipment was upgraded to handle their increased strength. Environmental controls were adjusted to provide more challenging conditions when appropriate. Most importantly, faculty members received education about human psychology and the importance of not mistaking politeness for weakness. Sarah herself adapted to her new role with characteristic human resilience. She established a cultural exchange program pairing human students with aliens from different worlds. The program's success exceeded all expectations, with participants reporting increased understanding and cooperation between species. One evening, as Sarah was studying in the Institute's library, she was approached by a group of first-year students representing various species. They had formed a study group and wanted her to join them, not because they needed help with their coursework, but because they wanted to learn more about human problem-solving methods. "We've been working on this diplomatic scenario for weeks," explained Crix, a young Chithari whose mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. "Our traditional approaches aren't working, and we heard that humans excel at finding creative solutions." Sarah looked at their problem, a trade dispute between three species with incompatible needs, and smiled. "The key is finding common ground," she said. "What do all three groups actually need, as opposed to what they think they want?" Over the next hour, she guided them through a process of reframing the problem, looking for underlying needs rather than stated positions. By the end of the session, they had developed a solution that satisfied all three parties, something their professors had said was impossible. "How did you do that?" asked Vex, a young Vethan whose crystalline form shimmered with excitement. "You made it look so simple." "It's not simple," Sarah replied. "It's just different. Humans have learned to think around problems rather than through them. When you can't overpower an obstacle, you find a way around it." News of the study group's success reached the faculty, and soon Sarah was being asked to assist with advanced diplomatic scenarios. Her human perspective provided insights that traditional galactic thinking couldn't achieve. She wasn't trying to dominate or control, she was trying to understand and adapt. Commander Zethkar observed these developments with growing admiration. During one of their private training sessions, he finally articulated what he had learned. "Miss Chen," he said, as they finished practicing defensive techniques, "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you gratitude. You've taught me that true strength isn't about dominance or superiority. It's about adaptation and growth." Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead with a towel, still adjusting to the lighter gravity that made even moderate exercise feel strange. "I think we've all learned something, Commander. I certainly never expected to become some kind of example for other students." "But that's exactly what makes humans remarkable," Zethkar replied. "You don't seek to be examples or leaders. You simply do what needs to be done, and others naturally follow." As her first year at the Institute drew to a close, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that morning in the combat training dome. She had come here expecting to learn about other species and cultures. Instead, she had helped others learn about humanity and what it meant to be a survivor species. The incident that had started with a misunderstanding about human weakness had evolved into a lesson about the different forms that strength could take. Sarah had demonstrated that true power wasn't about dominating others, but about protecting them and helping them grow. Her final report to Earth's Education Ministry was both humble and proud. She had not only succeeded academically, but had helped establish humans as valuable members of the galactic community. Future human students would face different challenges than she had, but they would also benefit from the understanding and respect that her experience had created. The last day of classes arrived with mixed emotions. Sarah had grown to love the Institute and the diverse community it represented. She had formed friendships that would last a lifetime and learned lessons that would shape her future career in galactic diplomacy. Commander Zethkar presented her with a traditional Draknari honor blade, not as a weapon, but as a symbol of respect between warriors. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said during the ceremony. "He taught me that true strength comes from protecting others, not conquering them. You embody that principle better than anyone I've known." Dr. Elon gave her a medical scanner programmed with human physiological data. For future reference, She said with what passed for a smile among her species, "We want to make sure other medical professionals understand what they're dealing with." Director Valax offered her a position as a cultural liaison upon graduation, a role that would involve helping other species understand humanity while assisting human students in adapting to galactic society. But perhaps the most meaningful gift came from her fellow students. They had created a holographic recording of testimonials from beings across the galaxy, all expressing gratitude for what she had taught them about courage, resilience, and the power of quiet strength. As Sarah prepared to return to Earth for a brief visit before beginning her advanced studies, she realized that the incident in the combat training dome had been more than just a misunderstanding. It had been a catalyst for growth, understanding, and the kind of bridges between species that would define the future of galactic civilization. The quiet girl from the dangerous world had indeed changed everything, not through force or domination, but through the simple act of being herself. In doing so, she had proven that the greatest strength often comes disguised as gentleness, and that the most powerful warriors are often those who fight not for conquest, but for understanding. The galaxy was a bigger, more complex place than any single species could fully comprehend. But with patience, respect, and the willingness to see beyond first impressions, different worlds could indeed learn to work together. Sarah Chun had demonstrated this truth not through speeches or theories, but through her actions and her character. And somewhere in the Institute's archives, a security recording of a 2.7-second incident continued to be studied by beings across the galaxy, not as evidence of human strength, but as a reminder that true understanding requires looking beyond the surface to see the deeper truths that connect all intelligent life. The story of the Deathworld girl would be told and retold throughout the galaxy, but those who knew her best understood that the real lesson wasn't about the throw that changed everything. It was about the gentle hand that helped her instructor to his feet afterward and the sincere apology that followed.